Okay, the important thing about plants is they have proportion just like people. So you don't want to put a tree in the foreground of a building and have it be tiny. So for example, if you're looking at this one, notice how the background trees are small, but the foreground tree is bigger than the building. Okay, so I have my foreground tree, middle ground tree, background tree. Also, you need to strategize about where the plants are going and put those in prior to putting in the background. Because if you put the background in first, the buildings, and then the plants are going to look transparent. The same holds true for the people. You need to strategize about where you're putting your people in, and place those in the foreground first, and then draw the architecture behind them so they don't look like ghosts. Okay, so now if you're looking at drawing the plant, notice how this is on the flimsy again. Notice how I've kept pretty loose with the line quality. I always want to think about the fact that my line is my light's coming from, in this case, the left-hand side. So I'm going to take my French 90, and I'm going to add some of that coming down the shadow side of the tree trunk, for example, and then up into the tree to create some branches. And notice how I try to make the branches going off different directions so it looks more organic. Also, the plant has proportion in that you don't want to make a thin tree trunk and then a huge mass of leaves. That would be too heavy to support that size. Or you don't want to make a tree trunk and then a tiny cap of leaves. That looks too small for the size of the trunk. So this is, we're looking at some photos of trees, or if you have any in your yard, you could go look at some actual tree colors. Notice also that I'm using the French gray for the bark, not brown. Typically, tree bark is much grayer than we think. So if you look at trees, notice the more gray tone they typically have on the bark. So again, this was the French 90 mixed in with the French 20 to get that effect of the lighter tone in the bark. Okay, so now I'm going to start to develop some leaves. So now I want to think about what kind of tree is it, and what's the purpose of this plant. Is it going to be a quick sketch where I just kind of quickly throw on a few leaves like that to give the client the idea that that's a tree? Or do I need to develop it further by doing a finer texture in the plant? So this is the dark olive. I'm just going ahead to give the plant leaf some texture by dabbing it on. But now I need to give some more 90 in there where the leaves overlap. So I'm going to go ahead and dab on some 90 in this inner canopy part where it gets some darker tone. And now I'm going to take the olive and put that on top to vary the shade of the green. But I'm going to further do that by taking some of the spring green, and adding that here to the top of the tree where the light's filtering through. A little bit to the back side as well. Notice I'm trying to let light feel like it's coming through the tree, so it doesn't just look like a big solid blob, right? I can also take some of this lime green and just fade out the green in a few spots so it feels like you're seeing a tone in the distance. Okay, so it doesn't take a lot. Plants, like people, should be there to enhance the architecture. You don't want to make them two-dimensional, or three-dimensional is what I should say, because you want the architecture to stay the focal point. So they're just there to enhance the view. Notice you want them to feel like they're growing out of the ground. So don't just do a straight line across. That won't feel very organic. So you need to have some kind of organic feel here around the tree so it feels like it's coming up out of the ground. Okay? So that's my general generic leafy tree. All right, so if you have background trees, it would be the same thing where you're going to take the 90 first and use that for the trunks. And in the inner part of the tree. But again, you're going to reduce the texture. So you're going to go ahead and add this green, the olive. See, I'm just kind of creating a crescent of that here. But now I want to bleach out the color. So I'm going to take some of this cream and just give it a soft wash for the background. So it feels like I'm losing that green further in the distance. Okay, so see how that could work. If I'm doing a palm tree, same thing. Notice how I broke up the continuity of the outline to make it feel like the trunk is more textured. So I could take the 90 and see how the lines kind of swoop down below your eye level, then they flatten out at your eye level, and then they start to curve up. Just like the ellipse we practiced, they curve up a little bit above your eye level. We have this dried frond area in the center. And now let's see how we can develop that further. So now I'm going to take some 20 and just soften that effect a little bit. Still want the light to feel like it's hitting it, especially sometimes with tropicals, you might have a strong light setting. It's like at a resort or something. Okay, so now I'm going to take the olive again and go through that and then just flick that for the palm fronds. So I'm just going different directions to start to develop the texture in the tree. Okay, so going further, you can see, like on these, notice if it's further in the background, I want to reduce the amount of texture, make that look a little softer. Where if it's in the foreground, I'm going to bold that up. So you might even add some pencil line or some variety in color to help that stay more vibrant. And some darker and lighter tones in there. Okay. So you might be wondering why I'm not using any of the dark green. Notice the dark green is a cool plant, a cool tone. It works great for, you know, kind of landscape plants that are sagey colored. So let's say I'm going to put a lavender plant here near the base of the palm tree. This is California. That's the other thing, is you want the plant to be appropriate to the setting. Meaning I'm not going to put cactus in the mountains or pine trees on the beach. Although in California we kind of do have that. But again, you're trying to pick plants that create the setting. So notice how I put the French 90 in first. Now I'm going to bring some of this cool green in front for this bedding plant. And now I'm going to take the lime green and drag through that to create kind of a softer sage effect. Okay, so I'm going to kind of layer that in. All right, now I'm going to take a little bit of color. This is the purple. So it could look like a Mexican sage or lavender. And just put a few dots of color here and there, so it can look like a bedding plant around your tree. Okay. Then notice if you're doing a potted plant, you draw the plant first, and then you're going to draw the pot around it. So a little tip about when you're drawing a potted plant or something where you're trying to show dimension in the leaves. Notice how the leaves turn, and that helps give it dimension. So in other words, if I go like this and draw this down, I can think of it as an arch. So this back part of the leaf is connecting to here and then down. So as I render that, I'm going to take I'm just doing one big leaf just so you can see it more clearly. I can take my French 90 here at that curve. Okay, then I'm going to take the olive into that. Okay, and then I'll take the spring green on the top of the curve where the light's kind of passing through. So you can start to see more of a dimensional feel on the leaf. Okay, so when I'm doing this potted plant, I could do the same thing. I'm going to take a little of the 90 here in the center. Okay, then I'm going to take the olive. Where'd it go? Okay, that through in the middle. And then some of the spring green, where I want the light to be passing through the leaves and those turns of the plant. Okay. Sometimes I'll do potted plants too. I'll add a little bit of this yellow cream, kind of like a moss. You know, where it can sometimes grow out of moss. So I'll put that there. And then I'm going to put a little bit of the 90 here, where the moss overlaps the pot and in the shadow. And then I'm going to take some of this cherry on top of that to create a terracotta pot. Okay, so you're going to get the idea. You can add some pencil tone to it too, so I could add some pencil to create the stems of the orchid. But the point is, whether you're using the flimsy or the marker paper, you want to add, just like we've been practicing, heavier line weights where things overlap, lighter line weight and lighter tones at the tops of things, more muted, less textured in the background, and more heavily textured in the foreground. Okay, so that is your lesson on plants. Just experiment, look at photos of different ones, just have fun with it, try it on both types of paper, see what you like, because you're going to pick a different paper for your next assignment, which is going to be to render the Timken Museum of Art, which is on a different demo, and I'll send you instructions for that. But in the meanwhile, just practice your plants and people, and those will go in your sketchbook. Okay, thank you.